I was given two Canon 6D cameras. They had been modified for astrophotography by a company called Central DS in South Korea. Problem was that neither of them was working reliably. So this video tells the story of how I repaired one of them, this one here, and hopefully I'm going to repair the second one as well. Here we are, here we lift off, and now is the big moment when I'm going to see how this Canon 6D has been modified to turn it into an Astro cool camera. So here we go, and now we've just got to find the ribbon cable, and there it is. So all we do is we just lift up the connector, gently lift it. It's amazing how small they make these little plugs these days. There we are. There's the socket. There's the plug. I've got access now to everything that I have been interested in seeing, because this, in the normal, the standard 6D, over here would be the sensor chip, and on the far side of it over there would be the shutter. So there's no shutter here. So what I'm going to have to do now is to try and hear why this camera is struggling to start up. I think I can see what might be a motor. Now why they would have the motor in there, keep it in there, because I don't think there's anything that needs to move. I'm going to put a screwdriver against the motor and listen to it. That is exactly where the problem is. Something is jammed inside there, because now when I put the screwdriver up against it, not only could I hear very clearly through the screwdriver that there was a loud click, but I could also feel it in the screwdriver. I could feel the vibration in the screwdriver. I guess that the next step is going to have to be to find out what is the easiest way to access this part of the camera. Okay, I'm now going to try and take the board out. And out it comes, so that's the board. Okay, this video now is going to show how I take the cooling chamber off. It's a little bit difficult to get inside there. Okay, this is the cable that goes through to the sensor inside the cooling chamber. So we just lift it off. Oh, that pops off fairly easily. So now what I've got to do, and I don't want to take off the motherboard if I can help it, is get down to these screws, which are right inside here. Right, there's one there, another one there, and then two on that side. I'm not sure if they can be seen. Okay, now I should be able to pull the chamber away, but then I've got to very carefully slide the ribbon cable through, because there's another plate that has to come off, which will allow the ribbon cable to come through. Right, so now there's a plate over here, and that plate's got to come off. Okay, here's the cooling chamber and its mounting plate. We have a look in this one. You can see here the mirror is fastened up with tape. It never needs to come down. Aha, this is where the problem is. So I think I'm going to take this off underneath a packet, so that if springs pop off, that they don't disappear. So here we have a motor. My golly gosh. It's turning this gear wheel. It looks okay, and so does that. So that is the axle around which that little gear was turning. Suppose the next step is to go underneath this housing here. So it looks like 1, 2, 3 screws to do that. Start loosening this one. I heard something click. Start loosening this one. I heard something click. Yeah, I'm dying to see what's underneath here. let's just make sure this whole thing doesn't pop up. Keep my finger on top. Okay, here we go. Look at all the springs inside there. Nothing on the inside here. Just some kind of rotary sensor there, which will tell the little microprocessor in what position the mirror is at the moment. So let's see if I move this back. See, there goes the mirror. And I now notice that there's a broken part. And this part must have fallen out now while I was disassembling. So now I've got to try and find out where would this part have come from. This is a bit like putting a puzzle together. This movement drops the mirror all the way down. Aha, it lifts up reasonably easily. Nothing special underneath there, except there is, aha, that spiral is what turns and pushes this lever. My golly. Right, go, there we are, look at that. At some point there we are. Yeah, it's at that point over there. And what is the standard position for this motor? The standard position should be down there somewhere. This would be the position in which you normally can look through the viewfinder. And it's only when you want to take a picture that it would move on for the duration of the photo of the exposure, and then continue its rotation until over there, because that mirror should normally be down. So this must be the default or the resting position of that wheel. Now let's have a look again at the traces underneath. That wheel turning anti-clockwise here, which means it's going clockwise over here, and that connector is connecting between there and there. So here is a point, there's a point, there's a point, there's a little copper bar makes contact between this central piece here, or this main contact, and then to that one, to that one, to that one, or to that one. Because when you switch the camera on and it actually detects that it's not on one of those spots there, that is when you get the error. My question is this. We call this camera number 2. And this is camera number 1. The history is that I was given both of these cameras. First this one, and then I determined that the cooling cell inside here was not connected, so I had to dig inside and find that there was a bad connection over there inside that socket. So I had to dig fairly deep inside there to find it and to repair it. And then I was in that process, I was given a second camera to allow me to do some comparisons. Now, I wasn't sure whether the second camera was entirely in good working condition. But the unfortunate situation where I am now is that this camera would not power up. As soon as I applied power, it would just go click, 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 click. The menu wouldn't start up at all, the camera wouldn't start up, and after 10 or so of these clicks, the camera would just stop working completely. And then what I also determined was that this wheel is driven by the motor, and I think that click, click, click was because it had moved to a position where at power up, the sensor from here, which is there and there, those are the contacts. I suspect that they had were not situated correctly, not positioned correctly, which means that the microprocessor said, hey, there's something wrong, we're not even going to start up. Now my question is, am I going to be able to repair this one? Another option is, camera 1, the mechanics of the camera work. It's the cell that is not cooling as well as it should. So the option there is that I take this mirror box, this whole box here, and swap it over and take this one's good mirror box out and put it in this camera. That's a fair amount of work to do. And then my next thought was that maybe instead of doing that, all I do is I bring the good cooling chamber from camera number 2 and I put it onto camera number 1, which means I'd have a working cooling chamber as well as having a good working camera. So I think that is the route that I am going to follow. That would then at least allow me to have a working camera for the observatory, and then in my own time I can continue to see if I can repair this part. So one of the things I want to do first is I want to know what the standard position of this wheel must be when the camera is switched off. So I need to know where it was making contact. So I've got one good camera here that perhaps can tell me that, because there are fine little wires that come from these contacts, comes out there, and it goes all the way to this connector. So what I can do is, if I measure across those connectors there, I can tell which one is connected to which contact. Then I can open this camera and I can access this ribbon cable fairly easily, and I can access those points. And then what I can do is see which of the contacts is a closed circuit where there's continuity while the camera is in the resting state. And then what I must do is make sure that when I put the camera back together again, that this wheel is in such a position that those contactors are over the relevant contact on this encoder. So what I'm going to do now is open camera number 1 again, although first, hold on, what I must do is I must just go and work out which connector here connects to which of the contacts there. Okay, that's number 2. So now at least I know which is which means I can now go back to camera number 1, which is in a working state, and I can go and measure Let's see what happens. And you see what I find here? There is that connector that comes from the encoder. Same size. So at least now I've got access to it. So I'm just wondering if I can take it out in situ. Here we are. It slides out very easily. So this is the other way around from what I've got. So that's number 1 going through to 5. So let's see if we can find if any of those are connected to each other, and the one that I should start from is number 1. So in the resting state, 1 is connected to 4. Alright, now we know where the wheel should be. The wheel should be in the position where those contacts are bridging this ground, if we can call it a ground, and that contact there, which was number 4. Okay, so this angle over here, it's not north, it is just slightly east of north. So that means if I turn it over, this is going to be just slightly west of north. So let's see what that position is. So there the contacts are at north, and let's just take them a little bit further, and that is where they should be. This should be the position now that is now bridging the contact between there and there. So if I were to put this thing together again, and let's see what the mirror is. The mirror looks as though it is totally down in that position. So this is the state, I suspect, of the springs and the levers for most of the camera's life, while it is switched off, while it is packed away in a cupboard. So my first aim is to have a camera working again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap the cooling chambers between number 1, which is this one, and number 2, which belongs to this camera. But number 1 doesn't cool as much. So number 2 is the functional one. I'm going to take 2's cooling chamber and I'm going to connect it and fit it onto the body of camera 1. In this step, I'm going to now put the cooling cell that came off camera number 2, which is a good cooling cell, cools down by 20 degrees or so, and I'm going to mount it on the body of camera number 1, which has good camera mechanics. Now we push the ribbon cable back through again. Now we're going to fasten Well, let's test it right away before we assemble again. Okay, here we go. Here we go, 180 milliamps, and it comes down to 60 milliamps fairly quickly. Now let's see, try power on. Yes, we can use this battery. No card in camera. And the next thing it's going to want to do is talk about sensor cleaning, which of course it doesn't do in this camera. Okay, it could not be performed, so the way to get around that is to just take an image. There we go. So there we are. And we've seen that it does work. So that's it for now. Well, that was quite an adventure, but I'm sure like me you are just dying to know if camera number 2 could be repaired. So that is my next project. So stay tuned to the Star Waders channel, and a like would certainly be appreciated, and a subscription would be quite special. So thanks for watching.